What's up, everybody? Hopefully everyone's doing good today and everybody had a good Thanksgiving yesterday. We just got a new video I'm going to check out here for the first time. It's from Dreamcore. I'm actually excited to see some of the nodes that I didn't know about on the sorceress here. So we'll check that out here and see what he has to say.
So here we are on the footage that I recorded in my playtime in Los Angeles, and we're beginning with Resolute Technique, which is unchanged from Path of Exile 1. Your hits can't be evaded, never deal critical strikes. This keystone makes it so that the accuracy hit check calculation is bypassed because the enemy cannot evade your attacks. As long as the attack makes contact, it will hit, but at the cost of preventing you from dealing any critical strikes. Blood magic has changed a little bit, and it's also moved quite significantly on the tree, now finding itself at an equal distance from the strength and strength int starting locations.
Okay. Looks pretty good.
This one removes all of your mana and makes skills cost life instead of mana. It doesn't grant 10% more life like it does in PoE 1. This one is very interesting considering that all characters will now have their entire mana pool, as reservations now use spirit instead of mana. It's hard to say exactly how useful blood magic will be without knowing how difficult it is to manage standard mana skill costs in the endgame. Next up, we have Avatar of Fire, which has slightly moved towards the outer side of the tree, but remains in the strength-aligned area.
75% of damage is converted to fire damage.
PoE 1, making 75% of all damage types be converted to fire,
That's
while
crazy.
preventing you from dealing any non-fire damage. This means that it will also convert chaos damage too, which is new in PoE 2. We know that damage conversion scales differently in PoE 2. You can only scale the portion of converted damage with modifiers that affect fire damage dealt. The downside modifier of preventing non-fire damage on this keystone means that you'll need to find the remaining 25% conversion before you take the keystone to prevent losing a chunk of damage. But overall, this keystone has a lot of potential to completely convert any damage type over to fire and allow abilities to be played in completely different builds. Giant's Blood has been a fan favourite since the moment it was leaked from the Tokyo Game Show a few months back, and we're finally able to get the confirmed wording on this one. You can wield two-handed axes, maces and swords in one hand. Double attribute requirements of weapons. So, this keystone is confirmed to not double the level requirement of two-handed weapons, as I had speculated may be the case in previous videos, and you can dual-wield two-handed weapons, but to do so, you'll need a mammoth amount of attributes, particularly strength. This keystone is such a fun one, and it's hard to say how strong this is without knowing how accessible attributes will be, or how high the standard attribute requirements are on the top-tier two-handed weapons. But if PoE 1 is anything to go by, you may need somewhere in the region of 850 strength if you want to dual wield the highest level two-hand maces. That's a lot of strength, but there is a very big difference in what is gained from attributes going into PoE 2, where you not only gain a lot more life from strength, but you also have extremely limited life scaling on the passive skill tree, making this investment into strength a lot more useful than just satisfying the Giant's Blood requirements. I expect to see some fun builds using this one. Next up, we have Unwavering Stance, which has moved a little bit closer to the edge of the tree. This is a really interesting keystone with a massive trade-off. You can no longer make use of dodge roll, but your stun threshold is doubled. Now, from everything we know about PoE 2's endgame bosses, the dodge roll is going to be an extremely important factor in staying alive. But this keystone seems to suggest that it may be possible to tank some of those very dangerous abilities given the correct setup. Stun threshold is based on a character's maximum life, so this keystone naturally pairs well with a character that is investing a lot into life scaling, such as one using the aforementioned Giant's Blood keystone. We're also not sure just yet how difficult it will be to invest into defense against stuns. We don't know if stun immunity
This is into the warrior side of the skill passive.
Bulwark's location is exactly opposite Unwavering Stance.
So we're seeing keystones that we haven't seen before.
Modifies the dodge roll, but these two keystones can't be used together. Instead of disabling the dodge roll, Bulwark makes it so that you lose your avoidance frames at the beginning of the dodge roll, and you'll no longer
avoid those
incoming projectiles or
damage
strikes.
reduction passive.
In return, you'll take 30% less damage while dodge rolling. Okay, this one actually seems to be very good for a few reasons. One is the location on the tree. Many builds here will have good life scaling and decent recovery, which pairs well with consistent mitigation. But something really important to mention about Bulwark is that the 30% less damage from hits should be present for the full duration of the dodge roll, not just the avoidance part of the roll towards the beginning. Add to that the fact that this keystone makes it so that your dodge roll can now be used to help mitigate the damage of any incoming area of effect hits that previously couldn't be avoided with a dodge roll, and I can actually see this keystone being picked up quite a bit. Iron Reflexes is unchanged from PoE 1 and finds itself in a very similar place on the passive skill tree as well. This one converts all of your evasion rating into armor, preventing you from evading but improving mitigation against physical hits. However, there is something important to mention here about conversion in PoE 2. We know that damage conversion will work differently, in that it will no longer remember its origin types and therefore will only scale with modifiers that affect the end type. One would assume that the same conversion system would exist across all mechanics in the game, and that would mean that the portion of armor you gain from converted evasion wouldn't scale from any increased evasion modifiers, and would instead only be affected by modifiers that would affect armor. Glancing Blows has moved all the way to the lower side of the tree and has been restored to its original pre-nerf
Block
state.
chances.
Block chance is doubled, but you take 50%
That's
of
actually a
damage
really good
from
one as
blocked
well.
hits. By default, a blocked hit does no damage, but this keystone will help in being able to more consistently block incoming hits thanks to having a higher block chance, at the cost of now taking half of the damage from those hits. But there's something important to be mentioned with Glancing Blows, and that's the new active block mechanic in PoE 2. If you're using active block, you probably don't want to use Glancing Blows, because this keystone will make you take 50% of the damage of incoming hits, even though you already have a 100% chance to block hits from the front during the Raise Shield animation. With that said, however, Glancing Blows is still a great keystone to boost passive block gained from your shield or
I feel like
other
that's like a
stats.
50-50 keystone. I don't know. Could be good, could be bad.
Hit effects such as ailment application.
Double chance to block, but then you take 50%.
Damage due to Glancing Blows.
I don't know.
The true power of Glancing Blows, though, has always been when it's combined with recovery on block. So we'll have to wait and see if those kinds of modifiers exist in PoE 2. Next up, we have Oasis, which finds itself in the middle of the Strength, Dex, and Dexterity starting areas. This keystone prevents the use of charms,
another
but
50-50
more
one.
recovery from flasks. Now, charms are a new equipment slot which functions in a very similar way to flasks.
Because the charms you
Using
need,
charges to automatically
they give you a lot
activate
of
on a certain condition, such as taking cold damage.
a lot of perks.
Importantly, charms can also be used to help solve ailments like bleeding or freeze, activating upon receiving the ailment to immediately remove that ailment. This keystone prevents their use entirely, and I'm not convinced that the upside is strong enough to justify it. One consideration here may be mana flasks, as we know that Mind Over Matter has a lot of potential, but the location on the tree for Oasis doesn't lend itself well in a Mind Over Matter build. Vile Pact finds itself moved towards the left side of the bottom of the tree, and it now makes all Life Leech instant but prevents the use of Life Flasks. We know that Leech is being simplified in PoE 2 to always leech a percentage of damage dealt, whilst the limiting factor will now be how much leech resistance a monster has. Instant Life Leech will still be a very strong modifier to have, but the trade-off here is that you need to kind of always be dealing
that's kind of a tough trade-off.
Need
your life
flasks. You won't be able
flasks
to use your life
in certain
flask in
circumstances.
where you're required to stop attacking and move out of the way.
Depends on the build, I guess.
From PoE 1's version of this keystone is that life regeneration is still in play for the character, so it's possible that you could forego the life flask entirely and just focus on life leech and life regeneration as your sources of recovery. Elemental Equilibrium is similar to PoE 1's version, but instead requires a specific damage type to then inflict the correct exposure. If you deal fire damage, you'll remove fire exposure and inflict lightning exposure. Cold damage will remove cold exposure and inflict fire exposure, while lightning damage removes lightning exposure and inflicts cold exposure. An important note here is that it looks like this keystone will no longer provide a larger exposure than other standard applications. It enables
this one looks awesome too,
in allowing you to
gain
gain
power
a type of
charges.
charge and spend that charge in a build that previously had a hard time in doing so. Keep in mind that charges in PoE 2 do not grant any inherent stats, and are used exclusively to empower ability usage. Speaking of charges, Conduit is located in the middle of the int and dex int starting locations and makes any charges you gain be gained by allies in your presence instead. Because charges no longer grant stats, this one is unlikely to be useful for any minion builds and is instead targeted at group play, allowing for a character to generate charges for their party members to quickly
it'll be good if you're running. If you're running in a group, this will be that'll be very beneficial to grab. Good for like any sorceress builds, monk, a warrior. You get the charges to your allies, and you gain presence. So that's a helpful thing with the party.
Is in a very similar place
if you want to grab that.
In PoE 1,
I'll be grabbing this for my Sork. This is very important to grab to keep your mana.
Now convert all of your energy shield into mana. That is wild.
It's freaking insane.
PoE 2, mana is going to be much more of an interesting
it's gonna be hard
on the average build.
Hard to maintain mana, but this will help.
Have access to their full mana pool to make use of unless they're using blood magic. Eldritch Battery is going to be a way for characters to gain incredible amounts of mana, which will be particularly useful with Mind Over Matter, which now makes 100% of damage be taken from mana before life.
So that's huge. It's going to be, you're going to use Mind Over Matter, and then you're going to use Eldritch Battery. So then Mind Over Matter converts your mana to life, and then this will just basically keep your mana fully up. So then your health will basically be, it's going to be like it's like a god build basically with those two together. So I'll be running a Sork Stormweaver, and I'll be basically converting all my mana to life, and then my mana will still withstand with Eldritch Battery. And I'll be able to keep a lot of my main skills up that require a lot of mana. So it's going to be just mana stacking, creating a lot of damage.
There's potential here for a character to use this keystone together with Chaos Inoculation and Mind Over Matter and completely focus on building a giant mana pool and having a large amount of mana sustain, as mana then becomes their only hit pool. However, just like with Iron Reflexes, it's important to mention the change to conversion. If non-damage conversion follows the same formula as damage conversion, the portion of energy shield converted to mana will not scale with any modifiers to energy shield, and will instead only scale with modifiers that would affect mana. Whispers of Doom now moves more towards the top middle of the tree and is now a keystone, providing the additional curse but doubling the standard curse activation delay. We know that curses in PoE 2 will have an activation delay after they've been cast before they take effect. This keystone is very strong if you're able to apply curses using another method, such as with Blasphemy or Hand of Chayula, to fully bypass the downside. Necromantic Talisman is essentially the same as Necromantic Aegis from PoE 1, only it makes your amulet apply to your minions instead of your shield. We don't know too much about amulet modifiers in PoE 2 or whether there are any interesting unique amulets to pair with this keystone, but the loss of the amulet slot in the context of PoE 1 is quite significant in terms of scaling minion damage, so we'll need to wait and see what's available for this keystone. Ancestral Bond will completely remove the totem limit and make the only restricting factor for placing totems the amount of spirit you're able to acquire. Each totem place will reserve 100 spirit while it's active, which is around the same amount of base spirit that an automated meta gem will reserve. We don't really know much about totems other than the few attack totems we've seen. The interesting thing about the attack totems we've seen so far, both Shockwave Totem and Ancestral Warrior Totem, is that they both have their own base damage rather than using your weapon, which means you could theoretically use a one-handed mace and a scepter in your offhand for spirit gain to help enable this keystone. Mind Over Matter is pretty much located exactly where it was in PoE 1, but it now makes all damage taken from mana before life, essentially making your mana pool your primary focus for scaling EHP. The downside of 50% less mana recovery is very significant, however.
But that's where you use Eldritch Battery
over time, including regeneration, leech, and mana flask usage, unless it's instant. This new version of Mind Over Matter unlocks some synergy with the new Eldritch Battery and with Chaos Inoculation, a combo which previously didn't function together. Zealot's Oath
Until
also
now.
has significant changes.
See this
This
one.
keystone now makes excess life recovery from regeneration apply to energy shield, whilst preventing energy shield from recharging. What exactly is excess life recovery from regeneration? Well, this is likely to mean any time your life is full, your life regeneration is instead put to work to recover your energy shield. This is quite a powerful keystone for builds which have some energy shield but are also consistently in the thick of battle, such as a melee warrior who's unlikely to be buying enough time for their energy shield recharge to begin naturally. However, it's important to note that the actual amount of life recovery is applied to energy shield, not the modifiers themselves, meaning percentage-based life regeneration modifiers will still scale from your life, making this keystone considerably weaker in combination with Chaos Inoculation, outside of the use of flat regen modifiers. It also has significant synergy with the new Eternal Youth, as the downside of Zealot's Oath specifically prevents energy shield from recharging, but Eternal Youth makes life recharge instead, bypassing this downside. Lastly, Pain Attunement has moved far from the top right area to the outside of the Strength Int aligned area. Its modifiers are also massively changed. It now makes characters have 30% more critical damage bonus while on low life, but a 30% less critical damage bonus while on full life. We're not sure yet if abilities such as Petrified Blood will exist in PoE 2, so the usefulness of this keystone will rely on mechanics that can force a character to be on low life, or to be considered to be on low life, to activate this upside. And there you have it, every keystone in Path of Exile 2's early access build of the game. There's some really interesting ones in there and some big changes from PoE 1 as well. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.
It's good stuff there. So we learned a lot of keystones that we kind of knew, and then some we didn't know. So anyways, take care, guys, and that wraps up this video. So GG's, and we'll catch you on the next one. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe in the links below. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Cheers.